Welcome everyone to the Mindful Moments podcast. So for those who are new, it's lovely to have you here. And for those returning, welcome back. These podcasts are an opportunity for us to kind of share the amazing things that are happening in our community with lots of different people from lots of different walks of life, and finding ways and showing ways about how mindfulness can be integrated into our day. My name's Lilly. I am the CEO and founder of Mindful Sparks, and today I'm joined by Alice Whitehouse, a teacher and trainee play therapist. So Alice has always been interested in mindfulness and mental health, and learning more about mindfulness practices role in making people feel better. She was first introduced to mindfulness by an amazing coach who used mindfulness in psychotherapy, and since then has wanted to share mindfulness with as many people as possible. And on top of that, Alice is also a really important member of the Mindful Sparks team. And with her experience in the classroom in early years settings and as a trainee play therapist, she's brought so much wisdom, compassion, and fun to the team. So we're really excited that you get to learn more about her today and her insight into her relationship with mindfulness. So thank you so much for joining us today, Alice. And I'm just really excited that people get to meet you and learn a bit more from you.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's just start right at the beginning. You mentioned about this coach. I know very little about this as well. So I'd love to hear a bit more. Who was this coach and what did they do? Like, how did they, make that kind of impact on you?
So, I was on Koh Samui during the COVID lockdown, and I was added to a random WhatsApp group by a friend saying they had a connection with someone who was training to do a course in, I can't remember the specific name, but something about mindfulness and psychotherapy. And to achieve this course, they had to deliver blocks of information on mindfulness teaching and practices. And so I was in this novice group. I was aware of mindfulness, but had never really practiced it. And especially like the meditation element, it was all new to me. So I did an 8-week course with a group of people, and my mutual friend. And I found that the things that were coming up, especially in that time where the bubble was felt really difficult in Samui, in that we could do a lot. We were very lucky not to be in major lockdown, but we didn't feel like we had our normal lives. So it was just a perfect time to use new skills in a mindful way. And so the coach Vanessa just gave us tips and grounding techniques and eased us into how to meditate. And I realized quite quickly that I wanted to learn more from her. So I was in a school where I was teaching early years predominantly, but I was also doing active listening with some students who were a bit older. And I realized that I didn't have anyone to talk to about how I was feeling in these interactions with students. And I'd learned before through my counseling courses that you need to have a mentor to talk about transference and things like that. So I reached out to Vanessa saying, please, can you be my supervisor ish? And can you help me identify transference onto clients to make sure that I'm supporting them and not transferring my own problems onto them and then fixing my own problems? And quite quickly, the discussion turned away from any sessions with students and turned towards me. And it's what I needed at the time. I was constantly going through life with high anxiety and not realizing that there was things I could do to shift it. And I think I kind of realized that in the first meditation sessions with a cohort of people with Vanessa, and then over time realized that one-to-one support was what I needed from her, and she gave me and still gives me when I reach out to her techniques in grounding, really clear tools on how to keep boundaries, which I was struggling with before. I've got a very active mind, and that's something that I have become less judgmental of during my meditation journey and mindfulness journey. She helped me to regulate the active mind and come back to an anchor. So she was just and is a fantastic human being who just offered so much in meditation and mindfulness that it went into my whole life, and that's how I got more into mindfulness.
It's amazing. And just to vouch as well, I mean, I also work with Vanessa and she's just phenomenal. So we will put a link to Vanessa's contact details down like below so you can check her out. She is an absolutely gem of a human being and yeah, has a very, very unique way, I think, of bringing that mindful awareness into your life in a way that really resonates with like individuals, right?
Yeah, I've been seeing psychologists and counselors since university, because that's when most of my feelings and anxiety really spiked. And they were all I had some amazing people that I was working with. No one looked at meditation mindfulness the way Vanessa does. And she says it really beautifully. She says, like, I don't want your story. I don't want to know what's coming up in terms of, oh, this person did this today. I want to go inside and see what's happening in the body. And that's going to link to something deeper. Whereas I think a lot of the time when we talk to counselors, psychologists, and mental health workers, there's more focus on, okay, what actually happened today and what did it trigger? But there's not as much depth in what is actually happening below that trigger, and below what value is it working against for you. And that's something that I really aligned with when I worked with Vanessa.
That's really cool. And you mentioned as well things like boundaries, bringing more compassion in, and you know, like you're saying, really trying to connect with like the root of what the triggering point is or the triggering experience is. So do you think having that mindful awareness makes it easier to you know to set those boundaries or to find that triggering point, or is it kind of mindfulness is just a really great way of exploring that, and maybe it might need to work in with other aspects as well, you know, maybe you also need to see like a psychiatrist or you know another expert in this field?
I think it's both. I think the way it's helped me the most is to allow in that moment to see what's coming up, because the initial reaction normally towards another human being, because I'm normally triggered by others. I think most people are. So in that moment, the work in mindfulness helped to observe what would normally happen, which was normally fight or flight. Of, I feel unsafe, not knowing that consciously, but I feel unsafe. I'm going to do something to counteract that actually didn't help, because I'm not unsafe. It's just that feeling that's come up. So I think that the biggest impact for me that mindfulness had is in that moment, instead of letting myself feel unsafe and then reacting to what's happened, taking that step back and going, okay, what has gone against what I believe here? So a lot of the time it'll be feeling heard. I really value feeling heard and someone listening to me. If someone does something and it makes me feel like I've not been heard, that has an effect on me where I feel unsafe. And so mindfulness helped me in those moments not to react the same way I had before. But then it definitely also comes up when you're in your meditations to explore it deeper, because it's something that's that's on your mind.
Yeah, 100%. So you started getting into it, you said, like during COVID. So it's a fairly new kind of newish practice, newish approach maybe to just navigating life, navigating the triggers in life. Have you noticed any changes in the way that, I mean, you mentioned there you were able to be a little bit more objective, if something is triggering you, it's not like just instantly, okay, like what am I going to do? How do I make this stop? There is an ability now to kind of pause and go, okay, what's actually happening? Can I be a little bit more accurate, a little bit more objective about what's going on, and then make an informed decision from a more grounded place? Have you noticed any other changes that maybe this kind of awareness, this having this more mindful approach to maybe these triggering experiences or day-to-day challenges, have you noticed any other changes or differences?
Yeah, definitely. I think working boundaries was really helpful for me to stop taking things personally.
Mm.
I'm naturally a very empathetic person, which is a very useful tool in a lot of ways. However, it comes with a want for everyone to be okay and to sometimes not be able to see where you finish and the other person starts. So taking on things that aren't yours to take on. And I was definitely doing that. I was, if a friend was going through a hard time, I would feel that as well. And so I found that through mindfulness practices and visualizations of a boundary that was porous, so would let some things in, but would keep people out, was very useful. And then it also helped with not taking things personally that weren't meant for me. I was so empathetic and so caring, but to a fault where if I asked a friend, oh, how are you doing today? What's going on? And they'd say, I'm having a really bad day and walked off, I would automatically think, what have I done?
Mm.
What have I done to cause my friend to feel this way? Or why can't they talk to me? And going down that spiral of it's my fault. And with those visualizations and boundaries, I got to a point, and I'm still working on it definitely, but I'm getting a lot more able to go, okay, that's might have something to do with me, but probably not. It's probably something else, and they'll talk to me about it when they're ready. There's no need to push. There's no need to fix. I can just let that person be and say, I'm here if you need me.
I think that's one of the hardest things, isn't it? Like you care about somebody, in any capacity, and you care that they're not having a good time, or they're struggling, or, maybe their mental health is being impacted in some way, and you want to, but at the same time, you have to look after yourself as well. And then you can, then you're more able to go and deal with the situation, right? So you're in a more responsive state than that reactive state. And it can be really hard. I agree. Like, I can relate to all of that. And you kind of think there are moments when you're like, every inch of me wants to go and, do something for you, or give you a hug, or do something. But I also need to respect that this is your process that you're going through. And I need to work on my process of how I engage with you,
Yeah.
that we can both benefit from this situation, right? Instead of creating maybe a habitual pattern of behavior between us that isn't mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we've talked quite a bit about you being a teacher. Yeah, I can relate. It's an amazing job, but you're pulled in many different directions. You wear many different hats, and especially being in early years as well. And I know you teach the real little ones who also don't have the language necessarily to really communicate what they're going through. How have you found mindfulness, or have you found mindfulness to be a useful tool to kind of help you navigate the classroom and everything that comes with being in an early years classroom?
Yeah, so at the moment I've got a class of 18-month-olds to 2-year-olds, and some of them are 2.5 now. And they can't tell you how they feel, and they can show you, and that's useful. Um, it is trickier than maybe older children who have the language. I would say, though, that any child can choose not to use their language to communicate. So I think mindfulness has contributed, but there's also, I was a teacher before encountering mindfulness, and this is something that I knew that I valued myself is mental health of children. And so looking at their emotions as they come in, separate from caregivers, what they enjoy, who they're attached to, because at this age as well, they have a secure base who they feel safe with. And my philosophy in the classroom is not to push a child to do something they don't want to do. And I can do that in early years. I'm in a very privileged area of school where my philosophy aligns with what I can do in the classroom, where the academic requirements are not not really as present, and it's more social emotional development and with other development as well. Um, I I think, and I try to model being very compassionate with children. So if a child is crying, I have heard some people in the past say, stop crying. And I will never tell a child to stop crying because that emotion for them in that time is valid. What I will do is be there for them in whatever way they need, in a similar way to friends and putting boundaries in. If a child is crying and doesn't want a hug, I will not give that child a hug. And so I think that actually my earliest teaching and philosophy of education naturally aligned with mindfulness. So they and being compassionate and non-judgmental. So I think it kind of worked hand in hand. And I was actually practicing a lot of it with my students before I was practicing it for myself. And definitely what I was teaching children to do to self-regulate was not what I was doing myself. And so, developing my own mindfulness practice helped with that. I think it's definitely also helped with how I am with adults, because friends you tend to get on with, and there's a connection there. Working with other people, you're not always going to get on with all your colleagues. And so being more compassionate towards my colleagues, I've definitely seen a shift since being more mindful. And towards parents. I think sometimes there's a really good relationship between teachers and parents. And sometimes there's a little bit at odds, or a little bit of competition is maybe a strong word, but that parents want to show they're doing the right thing, but it might not be with what aligns with how the child develops at school. And so sometimes there's tension in those relationships. And I feel like being more compassionate and mindful and having my mindfulness practices allow me to understand that parents are just wanting to show you what they're doing for their kids. They're not trying to put you down. There's just fear there as well for them when they give these young children to me. And so to hold that for them as well and be compassionate towards that, rather than judgmental of, why don't you trust me with your child?
Yeah, and that's a big, that's a whole big conversation as well. I think when you are thinking about even, I don't teach as young as you, but I teach the younger students kind of between 4 and 6. And again, there is that kind of, I'm not a parent myself, so I don't really understand it, but I can imagine and I can appreciate, like you're saying, like, here's my child, random person, and you're spending all day with them, treat them well. And when you do have maybe that conflict of approaches or conflict of values about what you want to bring into that child's life, yeah, it can be really hard, right? It can be tricky. And and I've heard teachers, I'm sure myself, if I really sat down and took the time to reflect, that can also impact the way you engage with that child as well. Like, am I really engaging with them as a human as they are here, or am I engaging what I'm perceiving them to be or what I feel that they should be doing. So again, we're not present with that child, or we're not present with that carer or caregiver for the child, because we're kind of how to say, like, we're creating a version of the reality that suits everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's so, I mean, I think this is a huge conversation. I think, the more teachers you talk to, I think the relationship between schools, teachers, and families or caregivers is quite a tricky one to navigate sometimes. Awesome, awesome. Wow, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you've had a busy day today, but just to kind of bring it all to kind of wrap up a little bit, you've given so many great examples of how you practice mindfulness and what it means to you. How would you describe mindfulness to somebody who's like, I've heard this word, I don't really know what it is, I don't know if it's for me. Like, how would you kind of explain that to them?
I think I would focus more on the here and now with them. So
Mm,
saying, I found that when I wasn't practicing mindfulness, I was constantly in the future. And
mm,
so the basis of practicing mindfulness as me has just been allowing myself to be more present with things. And it's not just meditation. There's many different tools that are part of mindfulness. And you can also make your own tools align with a mindfulness practice,
mm,
which means that it's complicated because it could be it could be many things. Um, I think that's the most important message for someone who doesn't understand mindfulness yet, is to say that it's being the most important byproduct of it is that there's a presence in the moment that without can lead to active minds and future thinking, overthinking in the future.
awesome. Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And like I said, we'll reach out to Vanessa and see if we can get some contact information that she's willing to share. We'll put that underneath this podcast because we 100%, both of us, recommend her. And obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments below, send us a message. We're more than happy to keep this conversation going. So, yeah. So, thank you so much, Alice. It was lovely to speak to you.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I'll see you soon.